Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Douglas A. Welton. I'm the chairman of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. Welcome to our October 9th, 2023 work session of the Planning Commission. I'm here myself as an echo there. I need my little protocol slide. Thank you. This Planning Commission session is being held in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center at 600 East 4th Street. We're in room 267. These are public meetings, and I would like to invite every member of the public who has a couple of hours to spend on the second Monday of the month between noon and 2 to come join us, because these are public meetings and we'd like to see you here. For viewing this meeting by the public or the media, today's meeting is being streamed live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. That is in accordance with all the state laws, rules, regulations, and other doodahs. Today's meeting, we're about to get started here, and I want to do introductions with the planning commissioners that are in the room, and we will begin to my right with Commissioner Lansdale.
Terry Lansdale, Planning Commission.
Robin Stewart, Planning Commission.
Erin Shaw, Planning Commission.
Rick Winiker, Planning Commission.
Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Teresa McDonald, Planning Commission.
Andrew Blumenthal, Vice Chair, Planning Commission.
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
RJ Harvey, Planning Commission. Sorry.
Will Russell, Planning Commission.
Thanks, everybody. Now we'll get started with introducing the staff that's in the room, and we'll begin with our planning director, Ms. Craig.
Allison Craig, Planning Director.
Candace Rory, Planning Staff.
Al Knight, Planning Staff.
And we have some other staff in the room, but they're going to be doing presentations later, so we'll let them introduce themselves a little bit later. Is that cool? All right. Don't want anybody to be offended. To get us started, one of the things we need to do is that thing that we do all the time. In your packet you received earlier, I guess at the end of last week, were the minutes from our July meeting, our retreat meeting minutes were in there as well.
You don't have to.
Nope. Okay, they're just for information. But I need to motion for the disposition of our July work session minutes. Do I have a motion that those are approved?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Second. It's been motioned by Ms. Shaw and seconded by RJ that we approve the minutes for our July work session. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The ayes appear to have it. So we are on to our meeting for today, and we've got a couple of topics on the agenda today. We're going to talk about an update on the UDO implementation. We're going to have that in just a minute. We'll also be having the UDO User Experience Information Exchange, and that's one where we all get to participate. So I hope you all are ready to fire your questions away. I think we're ready to get started. So Laura, if you and Alan, I guess, are the two that are going to present on this.
I'm sorry, let me stop sharing.
Good morning. I'm Laura Harmon with Planning, Design, and Development Department, and I'm going to give a brief overview of the latest UDO text amendment that we have filed. It's petition 2023-130, and will be coming in front of the zoning committee for your recommendation in a few months, and also give you a little bit of an overview of other text amendments that have gone through and our process for engagement. And I'm hitting down. Let me see. There we go. This will work. So you can see where we have been with text amendments. We have had 3 that have been approved earlier in the year and 1 that was denied. And then the one that we have that is pending just went through zoning committee. And this is for multifamily use adjustments for CG and CR zoning when in centers place type. And for the petition that was denied, it had really 2 components. One was the multifamily use adjustments in 2023-106, and one related to drive-throughs, which is where most of the discussion occurred. So this will be going forward for decision in a week from today, this last petition. And then we have recently filed our second cleanup text amendment, 2023-130. And again, we had 1 text amendment, cleanup text amendment, already approved back in May. And so this addresses multiple items identified by the community and staff. We'll have a virtual engagement session next Wednesday, actually 2 sessions, one at noon and one in the evening. We're going to send out a calendar appointment to you all so that if you want to attend, but you will have to sign up online to be able to get into the meeting. So we'll send that information out to you guys. And then we anticipate a public hearing in November on this. And so really want to just indicate some of the highlights of what's in this text amendment. So when we do a cleanup, it's really clarification, minor adjustments. And so some of the things that we have in here are stating that prescribed conditions apply in all zoning district articles and identifying their location in the UDO. That goes into each of the zoning districts to direct people so that they will know to go see those prescribed conditions. We're adding a time for temporary uses not listed in the use matrix of 90 days at the request of our zoning administrator. We are specifying affordability periods for affordable housing bonuses. We found that we had missed that for a couple of standards. So we're putting those affordability periods in there, working with housing and neighborhood development. We're explaining the placement of accessory structures. We've created a new use, commercial fitness center. We are relocating the N1F multifamily site layout conditions to prescribed conditions in the use regulations instead of being in the neighborhood 1 zoning district, because this was kind of hard to find. Hopefully you're getting the feel that these are not major policy issues, but are technical cleanups to help make the ordinance work better. Some additional things that we're doing. We have addressed some code enforcement concerns regarding vehicle parking and storage. That was in our previous zoning ordinance. We did not make it into the UDO, and we realized that that needed to be included. So we're also refining some standards for driveways and parking areas for duplex, triplex, and quadruplex, largely to clarify what is allowed and what the original intent was. Similarly, doing the same thing for sidewall and building height plane. You may be aware that there was an appeal a couple of weeks ago on that made us realize that while everyone thought that they understood what these standards meant, there were different understandings. So we realized we needed to get that clear. Providing greater flexibility in parking structure design options, renaming drive-through facility to accessory drive-through just so that it matches better what you think of, and adjusting some prescribed conditions. So there's some other things in there. Hopefully you will take a look, and we will send out the text amendment to you with the meeting notice information, but fairly mundane items, but still important to having the UDO work better. We're also looking forward. We're currently working on the campus district uses and new office district at the bottom of this list. Certainly the council referral on duplex and triplex dwellings is a large departmental effort. We have some compliance we need to work on with a new House bill that was approved. More cleanup because this is a living document. We're continuing to find items, but we don't want to hold all the cleanup until we have everything. We want to keep moving these items through, additional code enforcement issues, and so on. Also want to mention that Chair Welton sent out an email to you guys. If you have ideas of things that you want to suggest be adjusted, we will be sending out a form, and you'll be able to resubmit that form. Staff will take a look at that and also bring that back to the commission with recommendation. Just 2 quick slides on community engagement. We have 2 types of text amendments: technical, like the cleanup, or policy-based, like the council referral. And for technical, we have a very standard process for engagement with virtual information engagement sessions like the 2 we're having next week for this latest text amendment. We use our UDO website, social media, mailing list, and UDO website subscribers will be notified, particularly of the virtual meetings. Always for every text amendment, the council public hearing, commission recommendation. And again, the public engagement for this latest text amendment is next Wednesday. And then for policy-based text amendments, which are more complex, have wider impacts, we're going to have more extensive engagement. And we really haven't had a policy-based text amendment come through yet. But you could see we had some on the list. So we'll do everything that we do for the technicals, but we will also have additional items that will be unique to each text amendment, depending on who the stakeholders are, interested parties, and so forth. This will also, if it's a policy-based text amendment, go to the UDO Advisory Committee for their feedback. And you can see at the bottom of the page some of the types of additional engagement we've identified that we might do for policy-based text amendments. And I'd be glad to take any questions that you guys might have. That concludes my presentation.
We'll open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions off the top of your head? If not, I will jump in. Okay, and we'll get Andrew after me. You were creating a new use for, what was it? Fitness centers and things of that nature. And I think there was another place on there where you said you might possibly be creating new uses. Is that something that we can look forward to going forward? Because I asked this question because I have somebody that said, oh, I want to do Project X. And it doesn't look like an old use because they want to do some new things and grow. And they're probably appropriately entitled for the old uses, but the new uses don't fit that. So I'm just curious about the growth of the number of uses. What's the thought process there?
Sure. So what we do if there is a use that it's questionable as to whether it is covered by the UDO, we ask the zoning administrator, Solomon Fortune, to take a look at it. And if he's like, yeah, it's not covered by what's in the UDO, then we will create a new use and bring it through with a cleanup. What happened with the commercial fitness center in this case, and this would be another example of where we might create a new use, is it was falling under private recreation club, the way it was written. And which we want to allow in our residential districts throughout. So it's allowed in most districts. The challenge is a commercial fitness center like a Planet Fitness probably doesn't belong in the middle of a neighborhood. And we found that we needed to differentiate between the tennis center, or the swim club that would be a private recreation club and a commercial fitness center, and where they go and under what conditions. So that's why we did that. We also, the other thing you may have been asking about was the accessory drive-through, which was really just a renaming of an existing use.
Thank you. Mr. Blumenthal.
Thank you, and thank you, Laura, for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions. One, and forgive my ignorance, this is obvious, but could you clarify one of the minor tweaks was the time period allowed for temporary uses? Like non-conforming uses, I believe.
Yeah, this would actually be, we have time periods for temporary uses in the UDO, the list, but there may occasionally be something that the zoning administrator identifies would be appropriate as a temporary use that is not on that list. And so what we've done is said, if you're not on the list, you have 90 days as a temporary use. Look to Alan to see if he can think of anything. I mean, a temporary use that we have is like an outdoor market or something like that that comes and goes. But we could, I think a number of years ago, we had like a temporary medical facility that was set up in the convention center. Now, obviously that didn't go for 90 days, but it does give some kind of parameter instead of the zoning administrator having to come up with a time frame each time. Yeah, I think that's covered, but if
That
it
would be
weren't
covered under temporary seasonal sales or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted a little clarity. Second question, there are obviously some uses that were previously allowed in certain zoning classes that are no longer allowed in their counterpart in the new, right? Thinking largely I2 and L2, there's still allowed in I2. Various degrees of unrest about that, right? If somebody wanted to put forth a text amendment about uses, right? Say, for example, a laundromat was allowed in I2. Would that be a policy or a technical?
That would probably be technical. It depends on how large that is. I can say that where we're updating the uses for campus and it's a comprehensive look, we are considering that policy. If it's a single use, probably technical if it starts going in. And we do have that as an item to go back and look at. We've gotten some feedback about, do we have the right uses? Could certainly, yeah.
That kind of fall into what I see as gray area, right? That we'll go to a list later, right? But again, I'm just curious how that would be approached. And then lastly, on the policy based, obviously it's more community feedback, review advisory committee. I imagine there's no one answer to this, right? Because it depends on the complexity of the testing of it. But in terms of the initial process, is there any sort of a timeline about how that would be addressed, right? Like from like day one, you receive text amendment, decide that you're going to start to move forward with it. Is there any sort of a timeline as to the next steps on that?
If we receive it, if it were technical text amendment, it would be policy-based. It is going to be case by case. If truly you can imagine the referral on duplex and triplex, that's going to be probably take a longer time than campus uses. So,
and again, I think it's just, we want to make sure we approach it correctly and get all of the necessary side of it. However, we say a living document, we're going to take. Right. So I think that there's a balance there that I'm just curious. I realize it's we can talk a little about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've got Commissioner Russell.
Commissioner Russell, Laura, thank you for the presentation. Now you mentioned cleaning up the affordability period for affordable housing. Can you talk a little bit more about that for me?
Sure, and I think it was missing for and Alan, I may need some help on this, the quadruplexes. that are allowed in the N1 districts. And I believe that was a 15-year affordability period.
Yes, that was missing. Quadruplexes are allowed on arterial streets in a neighborhood one place type if one of the units in the quad is reserved as an affordable unit. But originally, the adopted UDO did not specify for what period of time that affordable unit would have to be reserved for. So in working with our housing and neighborhood services partners, they recommended a 15-year affordability period. So we put that into the UDO just to make it clear up front that that is what the affordability period is.
Anybody else got a question? I will ask one more from you, Laura. Once this goes through, and I guess we're going to have public hearing in November, you said, for this particular one?
That's what we're anticipating.
That's anticipated.
unless-
What's the date for the next, that you're kind of shooting for the next set of text amendments to come through?
Excuse me. So we're working on the campus districts. We're, excuse me, want to follow those. The uses for campus districts, the new office district this year. And we also want to get in and as long as needed, file cleanup text amendments at the end of every quarter. So we should have another cleanup text amendment at the end of this year filed as well. So we're looking at filing 2 more text amendments before the end of 2023, and then we'll keep on with that rhythm next year of probably every quarter filing a cleanup as long as they're needed, and a policy text amendment as well.
Okay.
And we could end up, adjusting that depending on what the needs are, but
All right.
the rhythm we're trying to get into.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of notes for folks. October 18th is the information session for this particular text amendment. That's virtual at lunchtime and at 6. If you hang out at lunchtime, you get to hang out with me, and that's always a plus. I heard you were all cheering. I can feel it inside. Also note that I sent everybody a note, I think it's the zoning committee plus Andrew, for those of you who are interested in possibly submitting a text amendment. Please work with Laura. There's some form exchanging and making sure that we get this in a place where people can have the right information and know which direction we're going. So please work with Laura if you're interested in pursuing that. We've got a slight addition to the agenda, and I'm going to ask Allison to fill us in on a possible grant that the planning department is pursuing. So if we'll give her a few minutes to take that on for us. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for giving me a moment on the agenda. And apologies that this is not on your actual agenda, but it's moving really fast. And so I just wanted to make the commission aware, and I think it would be great if ultimately y'all are as excited about this as I am, that we might get a letter of support. But there's a pro-housing HUD grant out there. And so Rebecca Hefner with Housing and Neighborhood Services and I have been working really closely on putting together a proposal for this, and some of the things that we're talking about including in it would be a full pattern book for not just ADUs, also including duplexes, triplexes, quads, maybe even townhomes, looking at the total cost of regulations in Charlotte, creating an affordable housing specific permitting team to take things all the way from through the rezoning and permitting process in an expedited manner. There's some other parts that Housing and Neighborhood Services is bringing that helps in managing the units once they're established as affordable, looking at some potential tax incentives, maybe reimbursements. So we're still trying to pull this all together. We just met with the county this morning just because there's a lot of overlap and connections between the city and the county work, just to make sure that we weren't forgetting anything. But as soon as we have something that we can share with you all, I'd be happy to do that. But I just wanted to take a couple minutes and let you know that's something that we're pursuing. So it's a fast and furious deadline. We have to have it up on the web as to what we're doing by Saturday. And the grant application has to be turned in by the end of the month. So it's a lot of work.
Thank you, Allison. And just to let everyone know, we have executive committee meeting next Monday. So we will try and do the things that we can do in that meeting to expedite getting support for this particular adventure. So we will go on to our next item on the agenda, which I call the UDO User Experience Information Exchange, long name. But this is, you guys, I often talk, I come from the software world. And when you make software, one of the things that you have is probably a pretty intimate connection is between the people that are making the decisions about what's in the software and the people that are actually using it. Software has very fast turnover in terms of how fast things can occur. And it's good to have that connection between the actual end users and the people who are possibly making decisions about that. So I wanted to bring in folks and talk about the UDO. And the reason I wanted to do this, and we'll get to those folks in just a second, is I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that what I want from you as commissioners is to have a deeper understanding of how the UDO is, being implemented. I want you to get direct exposure from the people who are out there on the front lines. That's as simple as that. The user's experience of the ordinance is what I would like us to get out of this. And that's why we're here. I asked Aaron to find us some folks, in the industry who had a broad range of experience and could bring different things to the table, knowledge, et cetera. And Aaron did a home run kind of a job for me. We've had several discussions. I'm very pleased with the folks that she's assembled for a panel. I'm going to give this over to her in just a second. One more thing. This isn't a public hearing. We're not here to make grand decisions about UDO or anything. We're here to get information. And I brag on you guys all the time. I say things like, the commission's full of nerds because they really love this stuff. And you do. So I'm hoping that you will get a good experience out of this what? UDO's, I have the first draft, 608 pages. It's on my desk. It collects a little bit of dust and I use it to prop up my screen sometimes when I'm on a Zoom call. I actually open it up every once in a while. And this is the part where I insert that, Will drives around with it in his car, right? You all will tell your children that story, I'm sure. But not to be outdone, Commissioner Lansdale has the Charlotte Streets map, or what is it, the Strategic Mobility Plan printed out. And so that can't be 608 pages, is it? Okay, well, then I guess Commissioner Russell still wins on weight. But what again, I want you guys to do is to get some information, to have a better understanding of what the UDO from a user's perspective is and how it affects what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I have 11 questions here. Some of them may be good, some of them may be stupid, okay? I've never claimed to be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm gonna start us with those 11 questions. And I hope that you all will add at least 9 to get us up to 20 questions, because you all know the etymology of the phrase 20 questions, don't you? Oh, God, you will go home and Google it. I'm going to turn this over to Erin and let her introduce the panel of folks that she's assembled for us to talk about. And then I will ask our panel to come up and take the chairs that look slightly like executionerness. And we'll get started.
Thanks, Douglas. I'm not going to attempt to introduce any of these folks because they're all they've all got wonderful qualifications and they know them better than I do. So I'll let them introduce themselves. But if the group wants to come up and sit in the executioner chairs.
One of the things I really dislike about this room, but yes.
This is Bridget Grant, Matt Langston, and Roger Manley. Rob Hanfeld has joined as well from Rebic and is choosing to remain a little bit more anonymous than the rest of the group. And Douglas, as you said, the goal was to have sort of a round table. I think that the folks that are here have a few points or ideas or suggestions that they want to share, and then obviously want to have a good, productive and collaborative dialogue with this commission as well.
All right. We'll let you guys introduce yourselves. We'll do ladies first.
Can everyone hear me through this? You can hear me.
Yes.
All right, good.
What? Huh?
It's like being at home with my kids.
Oh.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Grant. I'm a land use planner with and consultant with Moran Van Allen. I was talking to Aaron as we got started. I actually used to work for the city of Charlotte. I worked on the UDO rewrite. This all started a long time ago. I've been at Moran Van Allen for 8 years. And so Alicia and I started working on this even a few years before that. So my background is in land use planning. I've also been the Greenway planner for Mecklenburg County Park and Rec in another life, and worked for land design on the land use planning side of things. So it's given me a pretty unique view of the early design phase all the way through implementation. In my current role, most of you see me up at council meetings representing developers, but we also do work with communities around the region on how to implement different ordinances. So Matt?
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Langston. I'm a landscape architect and a partner at Landworks Design Group. Been practicing landscape architecture and land planning for over 30 years, and almost 23 years of that's been in Charlotte. Member of the UDO Advisory Committee, and our firm does land planning, civil engineering, basically everything outside the building. And so we're neck deep in working our way through the ordinance and trying to make it work. Roger?
Good afternoon, Roger Manley. I'm an architect, founding principal with BB&M Architecture. It's about a 70-person firm. I've been here since 1998, working kind of in South End area, since we started our firm in 2005. We kind of cover the Southeast, so we get to see Charlotte, how Charlotte compares to a lot of different jurisdictions. We've done work all the way out in Oklahoma, Texas, up to Virginia, and down to Florida. So we kind of have that ability to see, okay, what some places do well, what some don't. Matt and I and Bridget as well, we've been working on the UDO since, what do we say, like 2020? When, before the first draft came out, there were volunteer groups formed to study all the various place types and invite feedback about those place types and really how the regulations might affect them. And so we've been working on this for a while, kind of see it go through fruition. And let me just say right here, it's been a heavy lift. The staff has obviously got a lot. They got day jobs, as well as trying to birth this thing, and it's a really complicated document because it kind of has to be, because there's so many different variables out there, and it's just been really interesting to see, and that's why Matt and I and a couple others have continued to just kind of stay in the loop, and as it's coming out of the blocks, see how it's affecting development and whether it's hitting goals or not.
Cool beans.
So we're kind of going to take this. We basically have a few questions, and we're going to go down the row and answer them to sort of set the stage. And the first thing, and Matt did a great job of giving us some notes, is how is it working? I think from a very high level, it was a huge undertaking. And so it's expected that as difficult as it was to get to this point, it's taking us all along a really long time to adjust to it. I said, it's like waking up with amnesia and they give you a new manual and tell you to go do your job as if you were doing it yesterday, when we've got a completely different set of rules. And so we're all learning our way through it. We are finding the good stuff. And of course, we're finding the things that we're working through. Was this an intended consequence? Can we massage some of these things? Or what's a new way for us to look at development? We have goals and objectives that came out in the 2040 plan. How do we best design our city to sort of follow that? So how's it going? I mean, Matt and Roger can get into more of the details there on the implementation side, but it continues to be a heavy lift for us. I think we mentioned it's a living document every single time this gets brought up. And I think that's a really healthy recognition that we're going to continue to grow with it, and we can't expect the amendments to go as fast as we would like them to because it took us a long time to get here. How's it going, Matt?
Well, similar, to your software background, the prior zoning ordinance existed for 30 years or so in one form or another. So we had like version 30.2, and so many of the kinks have been worked out. I think in Laura's presentation, she showed maybe 5 or 6 text amendments that have gone through or in the works. And so we're at about, version 1.1 or 1.2. And so there's some kinks to work out. The other thing is it consolidates so many other documents, and in ways that's adding some simplicity. The residential tree ordinance had density bonus components to them. They were over here in the tree ordinance, not in zoning where the rest of the lot size criteria were. So somebody might not know it's even existing over there. So the document's done a good job of sort of consolidating all that so that it's a little bit more one-stop shopping. You can find, definitions in a consistent location. All the stuff about stormwater is in a consistent location, erosion control, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in general, that's an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, it's, to echo, what Matt said, and the software theme here, it's beta testing right now. If it was a software, it was kind of developed, in the lab, run through a bunch of different tests, but now it's kind of out in the live world. And it's like, an app that you release on your phone, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, why is that fritzing out? Because, this teenager is doing this thing with it that you really didn't expect it to. Same thing here. It's like, oh, okay, when these sets of rules get applied to a site that isn't perfectly rectangular and flat, it's some weird hexagonal shape, and it's got a bunch of different streets and maybe 4 different frontages. Maybe all of them qualify as primary. Does that make sense? And so that's the feedback loop that needs to happen, and it is happening. I think from the professional side, we're lobbing questions, back to staff and like, is this what you really want meant? And, they're lobbing, questions back to us and like, did you not read the UDO? And it's like, no. But it's that stuff that goes on. I think it was really interesting to see how, the transition and really kind of the policy goals for 2040 is, we have these goals, and one of them, is about diversity, equity, and inclusion housing. And a lot of that can only be accomplished through density. So making sure that we're keeping our eye on that target density target is going to be really important, because if we, all the planners are saying 385,000 people coming into Charlotte by 2040, right? So I'm not quite sure how many households that housing units that equates to, but we've got to make sure that we're going to meet that. And if anyone who's ever put forth a strategic plan, you want to be conservative. You want to be, you want to make sure you build in a percentage of fluff into that as well to meet that goal, because you never know, what's going to happen. That may be drastically underestimating it, and who knows? That could be it. So how do we maintain that density? And we saw it kind of through the different place types, community activity center, regional activity center, bumping up, the heights. We're getting squeezed horizontally, but, converting to a form-based type ordinance, it allows the designers to kind of get creative and pack more density into that envelope, which is good. It's just, there are some areas where, adjacency to single family housing right next to like a Todd UC or a Todd CC, where we're capped at 50 feet for the first 100 feet and then 65 for the next 100 feet. I mean, you're cutting out a lot of density in these areas. something that kind of concerned me. But again, this is staff's burden. Like they're trying to balance that versus what they're hearing from the neighborhoods and, and probably council too. So it's, it's that balancing act. And I think it's like a piece of software, that feedback loop has to keep on running to fine tune it and adjust to changing conditions.
In software, they call it continuous integration. And I will give you, there's another, when you guys compare what you're doing to software, there's a quote that we build our computer systems like we build our cities over time without a plan and on the ruins of what was there before. So,
But we've got a plan.
so we're in a different place then. Go for it. Yeah.
So the next topic was sort of clarity and predictability. And that was one of the cornerstones of the ordinance rewrite, was how do we stop negotiating every single point in these conditional zonings that go pages and pages long when there are so many of these things that could just be baked in. Like, we know the good design standards that we want. We shouldn't have to keep on reminding people, could you please put doors on your active streets? Can you please orient the buildings for the public streets? And so the UDO has really helped us with that. It's giving us some certainty, but at the same time, I'd say it's unpredictable because we're still reading it. We're still learning how to apply it. We're still learning how to figure out, we have this site, to your point, Roger, that's not a perfect shape and it's not the perfect size. And there's some policies that guide us to the specific districts that we want to use. And if those don't align with the size of the site, it's difficult. And you don't necessarily want to stay undeveloped because we're trying to do infill stuff. So I'd say we're working on that. Do you want to talk about predictability and clarity?
Sure. So one of the things to also keep in mind is the UDO is really, it's one tool in the toolbox. And one of the other tools, one of the important tools in the toolbox also is the policy maps. And Alicia is working on those right now. And those are supposed to be getting worked on over the next, 24 months or so. Those go together. And when you talk about predictability, when someone comes to me and says, what can I do on this site? It is not only looking at the zoning, but it's also looking at the policy maps. And sometimes it's looking at, should this be rezoned or should it stay with its existing zone? All those pieces are sort of swirling around while the policy maps are still getting worked on. And so, you've heard often in front of city council, this project is inconsistent with the policy map, but recommended for approval. And I believe staff's working on trying to come up with some interim guidance on that, which is welcome, very much so. I mean, because I talk to people on the phone and I'm like, well, you might be able to rezone it, but I can't, sort of handicap its degree of success because it's not all baked yet. So, I mean, that's something that's important that we all need to work on to help get to its conclusion so that there's a little bit more predictability. One of the other things that I was thinking about earlier in terms of, when Roger was talking about projects that move out of sort of the laboratory space into actual site. One of the examples, religious campus as a use is essentially, like a large church campus. If a church has a pre-K or K through 12 school that's affiliated with it, like Calvary or one of those large campuses, those were permitted uses in R3. So they've translated to N1A, neighborhood 1. Religious campus is not a permitted use in neighborhood 1. It's supposed to be in institutional campus. And so those are some things that are sort of unintended, unexpected. Is it going to get fixed? I'm certain it will. But these are just some of the things that are popping up as we roll the things out.
Predictability, again, going back to all the various jurisdictions that we work in. I can tell you some of our customers coming from out of town, Chicago, DC, New York, they're actually impressed. They're like, wow, this is pretty crystal clear, more or less, because I think there's unpredictability going on right now because we're in the rollout stage. But it's a fairly good logic trail the way it's set up, as the document in general. Some of the other jurisdictions that we roll into, it's more like, hey, you got to go see the guy. You got to go see the guy to figure out what you can actually do here, right? That's you're like, oh man, this is great. Okay. So having something like this, and even if you go back to the prior zoning ordinance, as many Band-Aids and baling wire we put around that, there was still a lot of unknowns in it. So I think in the end, this is going to be a lot clearer. Right now, there's a little bit of unpredictability going on about it, just because it's new and it's new to the staff as well that are enforcing it. So, that training is going on, and any word-based document, you're going to have like, well, what did that sentence mean? Unless it's accompanied by a graphic that's showing, 20 feet up, 45-degree angle, there's always going to be some interpretation area. And, again, that's I call it the feedback loop that we're going to have to go through. But I think in general, you're seeing the design community probably, not freaking out, but they're like a little, we're all a little bit lost if you haven't been deeply involved in it. Because, we're all just kind of taking care of our customers and do this kind of long range, looking into something that hasn't been passed yet. Now everyone's looking at it. And I think what you'll see is it'll start to ramp up, because the cyclic period of our projects are usually not very quick, right? So it just went live in June. The system is still working through everything under the old ordinance for the most part. You're just going to start seeing stuff coming in under the new UDO. And that's where we're going to start to uncover like, wow, that wasn't what we thought it would be. Or like, yeah, man, this is pretty good. I'll give a shout out to the interface. The supporting document button is a godsend for me, because I always hated going on that mole hunt for all these various documents, that, the ordinance referenced. So now it's really easy to find. What's that? Outcomes?
Talk to your peers and competitors probably a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I think, so the outcomes, I guess from a form-based ordinance standpoint, Raleigh is close, and also, kind of a peer in that respect, in their ordinance. They use stories instead of feet by height, which is kind of interesting. But we were working in there before, this UDO got rolled in. So we kind of understood that, the way to approach that. I think just getting the envelope and giving it to designer is a lot better way to go about things. Because because it allows for market flexibility. Who knows? In 5 years, micro units may be the rage, right? And so if you were like tied to a units per acre type thing in a TOD district or anything like that, then everything would have to be rewritten. Now you're just giving us the envelope and leaving it up to us to figure out.
From an outcome standpoint, from my perspective, I feel like this is one of the most important things that everybody should be looking at. The document is very prescriptive, and it talks about height, talks about architectural features and massing and grade relationships between doors and the land outside. We need to have an ongoing and continuous dialogue to have, and by dialogue, I mean two-way conversation. Is the city getting what they're wanting to get from this document? Is the market responding in a way that is aligning with where we're trying to go? Like Roger mentioned, a lot of times the market wants to get out ahead of where a lot of the policy is. Are there things that the market's trying to do this document might not be letting them do? And is that a conversation worth having? I think the dialogue moving forward is going to be one of the most important things so that we can keep focusing on, are we getting what we wanted to get out of this document?
So I'd say it sort of took away some level of assurance, right? Someone used to call and say, I want to rezone this piece of property. And you'd say, okay, this is easy. It's this, it's that, we'll work with staff, we'll work with the community, we'll just get there. It's slowing us down a little bit. And I don't think in a bad way. It's a much more thoughtful exercise as we're all trying to navigate through this in terms of adjacencies and land use and what's right. And is the 2040 remapping going to change any of this? And so I think that you might not see as many rezonings as you're accustomed to seeing, not because they're not out there. It's not just a market indicator. We're working on a lot behind the scenes, trying to get things in the right shape to take forward. I'd say another outcome is for everything that we tried to do to simplify so that you didn't have to do conditional zoning, not all the neighbors are happy about that. They're used to negotiating and they're used to having a seat at the table. But that's not always fair and equitable either. And so I think it's a period of change. And it's going to be a work in progress where we see, is this really the way we intended it to be? Or do we need to make some minor modifications? I think, Commissioner Welton, that's all we had on our side. To turn it over to you.
I will turn my microphone on. Thank you all very much. So Matt, I got a church that wants to do something different and they are so in one. And yeah, anyway, am I the only person in here who remembers when Richard Nixon was president?
I remember when he came through Charlotte. He came down Randolph Road.
I so wanted Richard Nixon to win in 1968. I'm just saying. But, Richard Nixon, eventually he went to China. There were Chinese people there. And there's the story where he talks about the symbol for crisis. It's the combination of the glyphs, danger, and opportunity. And so that's where I want to start with you guys. UDO's there. What's the most innovative opportunity that is in front of you that you are just waiting to grab? I don't want to ask hard questions.
Innovative opportunity in the ordinance that
that the ordinance allows you to do, that you can, it's like, oh, now we can do this, and it will be innovative in this market space. In particular, Roger, I would think you might see some of this because if you're working with a lot of different places.
Well, I'll give you an example. And I know I had to go through a rezoning, but so one of our customers, Grub Properties, so cycle development, that they're trying, there's no parking associated with it.
Yeah.
CATS is, accommodating them, putting a bus stop near it. It's all bicycle oriented because it's close to the greenway in town and stuff like that. That is, and I apologize, I don't have the UDO memorized, but yeah, there are, I do remember reading where it was there's going to be opportunities to have developments with no parking. And before that, it would have been, and it was, it was a long slog for Clay Grubb to kind of get that approved so we could, test this type of development in Charlotte, and to see whether this is going to fly or not. I really believe it will. How deep that market is, the market will find out. But that, that's pretty innovative to be written in. And I think in the right places, it is the right thing to do. And I do believe that there will eventually be some of our customers out there that, once cycle gets up and gets leased up, they'll probably try to test that market as well.
Got a question from Commissioner Winiker.
Thank you. Nationwide, how do you see the trends going in terms of eliminating parking minimums in municipalities?
So I'm going to just pull some information from that other people have given me and some personal information as well. Sometimes the parking can be driven by the bank, right? They have their checklist criteria before they will fund a project. I think we're starting to see on the financial side, when they kind of come out of their comatose state right now, that they're starting to recognize that not every development should have the prescriptive amount of parking per development. And customers as well. And I think every area of the country is a little bit different. It's really interesting. Obviously, the West Coast is going to be really comfortable with low parking levels. Northeast as well. Southeast, we're just kind of going through this kind of more intensive development right now. I think Atlanta was way out in front of everyone, and because they were kind of by themselves, I think their default was like, okay, let's don't short ourselves on parking. But the Southeast kind of market and more or less kind of culture is starting to get some good data back that, hey, when you have all these things present, the rail line or a bike trail or something like that, they're not seeing that their parking decks are being utilized as much as they thought they would be. So as they start getting that feedback and it starts kind of making its way back into the marketplace, the developers, they'll be a little bit more comfortable dropping that parking load, which I got to tell you, they would love to do, because that is just a drag on their bottom line.
Roger, are there, you talked about Atlanta in there. Is that the closest peer that we should watch in this regard close to us, or should we look up the road to Raleigh or somebody else?
I don't want to smack talk Atlanta.
Go ahead, please.
Because they, again, they were kind of the forefront of these huge metropolitan growth in the Southeast. They obviously have a lot of traffic issues and stuff like that. I think there are sections of Atlanta that we can pull from that are actually trying some really neat, innovative stuff, but not in general. I think, it's, everyone kind of in the community is like, well, we don't want to be Atlanta because of the traffic, right? And how do we do that? It's having a smart UDO plan, right, that encourages, smart density and, gets us away from, having to, what's that? Yeah, exactly. Having, one person get in a car for an hour and a half to get to their job, so creating these nodes, neighborhoods, these 10-minute neighborhoods where, you got a good chance of your job actually being there and, your groceries and stuff like that.
Robin, we've got a question. Follow?
Yeah, this is a bit of an impossible question, but I'd love to hear your answer to it anyway. If you could sort of fast forward 30 years with UDO as it sort of stands philosophically, like what would you envision the city looking like from, undeveloped areas to, the city areas to, the suburban areas? I'd love to hear your views on that.
Just a quick anecdote. I mean, that's the $600 billion question. One of the things that I was thinking about as, we were preparing to come here, get on Google Maps, go look at Street View, go down South Boulevard, and you can click and dial back like 10 years of Street View. Do that around the city. It is fascinating to see what happened. I mean, you remember the big pink building down here. Oh my gosh, what in the world is that thing? You don't even see it anymore. And that's the toughest question probably to answer, is how Charlotte's going to grow. And, you know, we look at the centers and we look at the corridors. Those things are probably going to grow. So what does that mean? What gets knocked down for them to grow? Did they grow vertically? You know, because so much of our fabric already has some level of development on it. Some things are going to get knocked down. And those are going to be the tricky questions to answer.
I think it's going to be tolerance on our part. I mean, if you ask most people, do you want this development next door to you? Most people are going to say no. They don't like to see change, no matter what form it is. We were joking around beforehand about greenways years ago. That was the worst thing you could possibly put in anyone's backyard. It's going to take a tolerance to accept the growth. And I think I work in Harrisburg and Cramerton and places I had never actually been to before I started doing this job. We don't want to keep pushing all of the growth to our surrounding counties. We want to be able to get the benefit of people who are working in South End, working in Center City, or in Ballantyne, or in South Park, people who are working in our employment centers, to have the opportunity to live here at all levels. And I have to say, I mean, we're just not seeing as much single family development anymore. We're not seeing it across the region. The prices are just too high. The land cost is too high. The construction cost is too high. Younger kids don't really want a yard anymore. Younger kids, wow, I'm dating myself. They like the idea of sort of concierge living on a small lot and different features. And so I think that there's got to be an acceptance on our part as we look at policies to welcome the growth in our city so that we're not constantly pushing it out.
And your question again was, what does Charlotte look like? Yeah. It's ideally, you know, there's going to be 20 different opinions in this room. It's like, what neighborhood in Charlotte do you like, right? So it's got. I think Charlotte's got to have a little bit of everything. I do think the suburbs are going to continue to develop these kind of secondary centers, and just as like no one probably ever really saw South End kind of popping up and like a afternoon thunderstorm in the summer, just blowing up there, and all of a sudden it created its own little neighborhood market. So much so that literally people from Austin are saying, "Oh, we got to be there," right? So it's a little bit, it's of course very organic because no one's like, telling developers what to do. But, what made that work was it had a little bit of everything. It had the residential, you gotta have the people there to support the retail, right? And once you have both of those, well, then the employers want to be where the people are. So what we've got to make sure of is that the people want to be in these places. One of our biggest economic draws we keep on hearing is, Charlotte's very affordable compared to, some of these other big metropolitan centers. We can't kill that, right? That's part of what's the engine right here. So we got to make sure that that our growth isn't so limited that supply becomes constricted and affordability goes out the window.
Thanks. Yeah. And since you guys obviously read my questions or my mind beforehand, I'm going to skip down to a question I had. For those of you who haven't looked, Mecklenburg County has a demographic analyzer, and it is a very interesting thing because it gives you the latest population data and it segments it up into many, many different ways. And it's wonderful. But I looked at it this morning and the data from 2022 says simply this: we're getting younger. 20% of the population moving into town was in their 20s, okay? And compared to everybody else. We're getting smarter. The number of people with graduate and postgraduate degrees was the lion's share of people that are coming to this town. And we're getting more well compensated because apparently 200 is the new 100K. So that was interesting to me because how do we build a city for that group and everybody else as well? And, you know, it kind of plays back into the question Robin asked of what does the city look like? You know, right now, you know, it's South End is a very, you know, 5-over-1 kind of a place, right? This weekend I fell into the architect Louis Sauer, and he's building low-rise, or had built low-rise, high-density apartments. And I thought, where are those in Charlotte? Is there a place for a new type of product and a new type of density? Are you guys seeing any kind of demand for that? Or do you see that possibility arriving? I guess that was a very long-winded question, but.
That's probably to me. The rail yard development was a combination development with Beacon and Furman Housing Studio. So a lot of the units there are micro units, and it's obviously doing very well. I think not being a developer, if it's doing well, someone's going to follow it up. I can tell you personally that, some of the projects, not a lot of them, are, exploring micro units. And, when you think about things, it makes sense in a city. I mean, some of the employees I've hired out in New York City, they come down here and they look at an apartment and they're like, wow, that walk-in closet is as big as my apartment. And because, the Southeast is still getting dense, just starting to get dense. And, we're used to the really big 775 square foot, 1 bedrooms. That's kind of the legacy product out there. Yeah.
The fact that we don't have density in the ordinance, that was one of the innovative tools.
Yeah.
Not having density in the ordinance to prevent us from being able to get creative in what the market wants. That was one of the ways we were less prescriptive. I'm good. Okay, that's a little.
And I like that in the sense that the question then becomes the argument of when you hit the community of, I don't want this density in my neighborhood.
Right.
And are there, to me, it's like when we talk about density, if the word South End is not in the sentence after it, or Plaza Midwood or NODA, then, usually it's not a positive thing. But how do we get that density? Or are you even seeing requests, I guess, ultimately last question, are you seeing requests for possibly doing density in other parts of town, which to me makes sense. We are at 310 square miles. It's not all in South End.
Well, I mean, who would have, just like South End, who would have called Lower Tuck, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like development is like water. It finds, the path of least resistance, and then that's where it sets. And Lower Tuck was just a great opportunity for a bunch of developers, Third and Urban. I mean, everyone's doing, some really good stuff out there. And throwing some density up there. Now, could that be more dense area? I would say, especially where the Silver Line is running, it probably should be. And I don't know what the policy map says. I know Silver Line is 10, 15 years out, right?
And we've approved zonings that are TOD on Wilkinson Boulevard.
Yeah.
Because the theoretical Silver Line is going through there.
And, the life cycle of projects is, the developer searching for land, going through due diligence, maybe going through closing, then you've got a design, you got construction. That's almost 5 years right there. So, we're talking about maybe 2 to 3 cycles before we're going to be dealing with, the Silver Line development. So on both ends too. I can tell you all the improvements that have been made to Independence and going down to Independence and Eastland, the interest will start to creep down there as well.
I'd like to add just real
Go
quick,
ahead.
from
Thanks, man.
from a land use standpoint, as you add density, it's important to be mindful of open space, park and rec, the micro units that Roger was talking about. Those folks need more of that.
Yeah, we did have, the executive committee had a meeting with Park and Rec's land acquisition group about a week or so ago. And the chairman at Park and Rec is befuddled by the lack of open space and parks in certain parts of town, but that's another conversation. So we'll skip out on that. Bridget, you brought up a point about it was slower going through the process now, but it was easier. Was that what I'm hearing?
I think it's slower, but I think it's more thoughtful.
Thoughtful.
Right.
that's
We've had to slow down and really, take stock of a lot of factors. I do appreciate that all of the ordinances are in one place. We used to get calls all the time when someone would say, we have an out-of-town landscape architect. They've looked at this plan. They've gone through the whole ordinance. They've combed through it. But they didn't know there was a subdivision ordinance in a different document that completely blew up their entire plan. And so I think that that's simplified things for, sort of leveled the playing field. But we've had to slow down a little bit.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you guys this. Earlier you mentioned design standards and the whole notion that the door should actually face the road kind of stuff. How do design standards play out? And I'm going to give you 4 parts of town to poke at. South End. Let's poke at South End. So you've got design standards there. Let's go down to Arboretum, South Charlotte. Let's go up to Beatties Ford Road, and let's go up to Eastway. All right. Can we use the same design standards all over? I mean, how does it play out? Does it make it more difficult to work in certain parts of town as opposed to others?
So my quick thought is, no, it's really hard to use the same design standards. But second to that, just because we've always built something a certain way out at the Arboretum or out in the outlying areas doesn't mean we should continue to do that and give an automatic, well, they can't do that because they're a big box, or they can't do that because they're car oriented. So I think that it's sort of a blend to me. I don't know, from the landscape.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, I think that as you get away from the transit centers, I feel like our architectural standards are geared towards walkability. And when you apply that sort of land planning to a property that's on a 6-lane thoroughfare, nobody's walking. And so there's probably extra effort that needs to be made in order to encourage the walking so that it functions the way it's intended.
Or it's a waste of money.
Or it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I guess the question is, are people gonna really actually walk out at the Arboretum the way it is, and how long will it take us to transform the Arboretum into a walkable space?
So I worked on the Arboretum, 51 in Providence Road, and everyone would have said, no one's going to walk there. But people would say that back 15 years ago, no one was going to walk in South Park, and look at what we're doing. So you don't want to preclude the ability for it to be walkable. But at the same time, if you look at Waverly, 6-lane road, right? It's not exactly easy to walk. So it's a balance of not precluding our ability to make something walkable, accessible, bike friendly, but also sort of, is there another way we'd rather spend the money to make the internal side of the site more walkable, more usable, more ped friendly?
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Some sites might need more help than others.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions here. I'm trying to figure out how to ask this one. Are there any products that are outdated because of the UDO that we have in town? It kind of plays into that notion of we wouldn't necessarily redesign the Arboretum if we were to do it again. Maybe we would, I don't know. But now that we have the UDO, is it like, well, no, I really can't do that here?
I think that's probably a market question, and a lot of it ties back to land price. Conventional, like Roger was talking about, conventional single-family subdivisions, large lots aren't getting done as often anymore. The lots are getting smaller. People want less yard to take care of. A lot of times the HOA will maintain everything, and so that's sort of densifying on its own. N1, right now, N1A, for example, has pretty big lots, and then the conservation subdivision component. But what is happening is the market's sort of steering towards, well, we need to figure out a way to get more units on it. So they're looking more at duets and things, because we've had clients before that just want to go maybe one lot size down, and that's where they think the sweet spot is. And in some ways, it's a little more difficult to do that because it's a bigger leap. But once you make that leap, you can go a lot smaller, and they may not want to be going there.
Okay.
So.
I just want to backtrack one thing because I do, and this is a civil thing, so it's not my expertise, but as far as the process and being a little bit longer, doesn't the transportation component, the studies kind of draw things out a little bit more right now? Doesn't it have to, like if. Everything having a traffic study? Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard, so obviously I work with more civil engineers than Matt, and so I hear various grumblings and stuff like that. I think that what I've heard is that may draw out the process. But to your question, so again, we're in the beginning of this, rolling this out. So, and not every product type has even begun to go through the system. What I wonder about is grocery stores. Especially, in some of the more dense urban areas, how do we get them in there? Because, that's also kind of part of that DEI, goal is making sure that these neighborhoods have equal access to, not only employment, but, fresh food, right? So I'm going to be curious to see how, when a grocery store goes through, if a lot of these design requirements are applied to it, whether it can actually go in. One of our first big projects as a firm, the Lowe's on South Boulevard. So we didn't do the Lowe's, but we did everything that wrapped it because the neighborhood was, forced, to force the Lowe's to do that. And I rightly so. Hey, it gave us a job. Because they're reacting like, I don't want a big box. I don't want big blank walls. I think hardware stores have a little bit better ROI than grocery stores. I always hear grocery stores are kind of loss leaders. But we need to get grocery stores into these neighborhoods, right? It's going to be interesting to see how design standards help preclude or are neutral on this because, ground floor activation, transparency, all that sort of stuff. We've all been in grocery stores. You got the coolers on the outside walls. There's going to be nothing transparent about that.
Yeah, I just think of a grocery store as there's an entrance and there's an exit, and maybe there's a window in between where you push your carts, right? And what's activated about that in terms of a ground floor? Not.
You're either going to have a much larger footprint where you can actually bring the box with active uses, like secondary retail, or do what we did is treat it like a parking deck and wrap it with residential. Or they're going to have to change their layout and have all this transparency. And they'll just assume go to another site rather than have to refigure.
I will dip into this, and you may or may not want to answer, and I'll just leave it at that. There are bonuses for doing things that align with the policy. Are those good, bad? I mean, how does the development community react to a bonus of, oh, I can go another floor? Is it cheap to pay the bonus and get another floor, or how does that work? I guess, and again, I understand that sometimes that's developer business decisions, but I'm just curious about a reaction from you guys.
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction is that's TBD. I think it also goes back to outcomes. One of the things that over time Charlotte has done is they've rolled out ordinances is, sort of the carrot and stick approach. And if you're trying to incentivize certain things, you make the bonus tied to that. And so it's one of those things to watch and have a dialogue about, because, the high performance buildings and things like that have a cost. Is it worth it? I couldn't tell you. But it may also be that we find that there are other things that are not happening through the UDO that the city wants to have happen. And maybe there's more opportunities for more bonus in order to encourage that.
Yeah, I mean, rather than TBD, it's going to vary from customer to customer, and also really from their funding source to funding source. Sometimes the funds will drive a lot of these high performance building standards. One that we're actively involved in right now, the electric vehicle credit, they're like, we already do that anyways. We're going to take those points. So some customers are like, loving those bonuses. Others are like, we'll just stay under that height, or we'll pay the fee in lieu of. In a way, the fee in lieu of is always a little bit more attractive to them, because it's a absolutely known quantity they can plug into their spreadsheet. Whereas, like, I'm not really sure what my EV charging station is going to cost, because I haven't gotten all the way through documents and I don't have my bids in yet. So there's always a little bit of risk with that respect.
Okay, thank you. That's very much what I've heard before, is that, you know exactly what the fee in lieu is. Like, it's just another item on the spreadsheet. It's a cost, it's known, et cetera. Commissioner Rhodes, you have a question?
Yes, circling back to the conversation that you had about the grocery stores, and I would also put retailers in there. I noticed that when I'm in the Southern California area, a lot of their grocery stores, like your Whole Foods and even your Targets, their Targets are typically, I would say, smaller. They're not like ours, kind of the super Targets, so to speak. But when it comes to the grocery stores, I noticed that they have multiple floors. They typically have 2 and 3 floors, and that includes, like, the parking may be on one, but they have multiple floors where they're having the areas. What stops us from having that? I know that you said a lot of times the developers don't want to reorg, but they just have done it in different areas. What's the push to drive them to have those conversations where they're having those multi-levels for our groceries? Because our setup uptown, if you think about even not too far from here, where our Target is located and where BJ's used to be located, it has the legs to do that. And you wonder, like, why didn't they do the multi-level? Because it gives you California feel, and it just falls flat, literally. So is there any conversation about how to kind of push them towards that?
So some of it is they've done it, but doesn't mean they'll do it again. We always say, is it a precedent or a lesson learned? And so I would say I've heard that Harris Teeter does not love the South End Harris Teeter that has all of that articulation and the landscaping, that they wouldn't do it again. We would have to push really hard. So I think some of it isn't necessarily that they can't, some maybe that they don't want to, and some of it could be, we have a 2-story Harris Teeter over on the corner of Providence and Queens, and it works. So I'm not really sure, other than the cost factor. Roger, if you want to speak to.
Yeah, I like that one too.
Yeah, we've done some work with Harris Teeter, and really actually is kind of lead consultants. But like up in Virginia, they have a couple 2-story Harris Teeters. It's a cost factor, and it's really also an operations factor too, because you've now got your product and your staff split on 2 floors. And I'm just telling you what they've told me. And so the ability to kind of flex product, it's broken down, and it's not as easy to kind of move things around. And then your staff is, kind of cut up a little bit as well.
Gotcha.
I totally get you. I mean, but if they want to be in a neighborhood, they'll go there. I mean, and Publix in South End, right? Yeah, so they got all the parking below them, but they're all, it's all on one big floor plate for the product. But yeah, they wanted to be there. And so they kind of made that concession of like, well, I'm not going to have surface parking at 6 per thousand right out in front of my front door. Yeah.
Just to add, Commissioner Rhodes, to what Roger just said, and I think Bridget alluded to it earlier, but my limited understanding is it's about scarcity of land, right? If you're at Queens and Providence, they have no other options. Whereas if you're in maybe the lower part of South End, well, we could go one block further and have our, full scale, someone else would do that for us. Whereas in the sort of denser parts of town, they're going to be forced to comply with sort of what the site allows. But Charlotte, as much as we feel we have a scarcity of land, I would say compared to Southern California, there is no scarcity of land still really in Charlotte.
We operate like we do. So that's why I asked.
Cool beans. I got like 3 more questions, and they may or may not be easy or hard. Community meetings are now on tap for every rezoning that comes through. Is that a good thing? From a planning commission point of view, we wanted that because we wanted to have, we wanted to have the neighborhoods involved. We wanted community people. She asked me a question about community people earlier, so that's it. I'm just front of my mind. Yep. Look, the bus ran right over Melissa. Anyway, how is the notion that you have to, is that well received? Are you getting in front of crowds that are loving everything you see? Or is it like, oh my God, they're in my neighborhood again. The blue Z pops up and it's like, oh God.
I love community meetings because you never know what you're going to get. It's, so I remember when we, with Crawls and rezoned Quail Corners, years and years back. And I thought they had the bucket of tar right outside the door. But the thing I like about it now is I bet if you went to that same crowd now, I think they appreciate, that what happened in that rezoning. Part of our profession, because we live in it, we can easily visualize what the end product's going to be. If I'm an accountant, I don't have that ability with rare exceptions. So I get the angst and the, and the concern that come out of community meetings. What I've always, kind of appreciated as we went through rezonings is finding what the hot button is, right? It's almost like you're going through your own individual small area plan with these people. And so you can create a response that, doesn't give them 100% of what they're looking for. But if you understand their hot button in the beginning, what they're really concerned about, then the design can kind of respond to that as much as we can.
I think that's true for conditional.
Yeah.
Like, I love conditional zoning, obviously. I really do think it gives you context sensitive planning. It gives you the opportunity to work on something like Quail Corners, work with the residents who are most closely impacted, really take stock of what's important to them. The nuance to your question about all rezonings. And so I've had to have a few community meetings for conventional zoning where we're not supposed to show them a plan because it could be misleading. Because if I'm rezoning to N to A or B, I'm rezoning for what could be townhomes. It could be 5 unit, whatever meets the ordinance, right? And so it can be hard because I'm used to the full transparency of unrolling. This is the site and this is the building and this is the elevation and these are all of the details and all of its glory. And I can take your feedback on this. But I was working for a developer and Habitat for Humanity, and they were doing a conventional rezoning, and everyone said, what's it going to look like? And we could say, here are a few of the things that Habitat is doing. But if Habitat were to sell this piece of property and not be the ones to develop, it would be misleading for me to tell you they are definitely the developers and it's definitely going to look like that, which can ultimately, and it hasn't yet, push you into conditional zoning because people then want the certainty. So I feel bad. It's like going to a meeting and saying, we're going to do something, but we can't tell you what it looks like. I don't have a site plan to show you. And do you have any questions about what's allowed in this zoning? Because that's all I can answer without you getting mad at me later. Right. So it's hard. I see that I don't shy away from community meetings, obviously, but that's a hard one. You love them.
I love them. Yeah, Bridget made an important distinction between the conventional and the conditional rezonings. I think that constructive community dialogue is important to the projects. You know, we try to design the projects based on, like Roger said, on input that we get, and it's important to have that dialogue and have it be constructive.
All right. Commissioner Neely and I went to a meeting a month or so ago with the people that had the bucket of tar, apparently, and they were not necessarily constructive. Hypothetical, if you could have another place type, what would you have? I thought this was going to be an easy one. Yeah. And, you know, again, none of this is, we're not making decisions about anything. We're trying to be informed, but I thought I'd throw out a hypothetical just to make sure that we were all alive. Matt, I can see those wheels turning.
Subway connected place type.
Ooh. Subway connected place type. Okay.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I'd just be pulling something out. You know,
Would you want a new residential zoning type? I mean, we got N1 and N2. Would you want another one?
yeah, I mean, so this is a question for Matt. Do you think there has been a good, a good replacement for the urban residential, the UR districts?
Community activity center mostly. All these bulldogs.
So a lot of what we see from a housing perspective is townhomes, you know, and infill townhomes and things like that. There's people who want to live in their communities but don't need a big house anymore. So, you know, people are developing small, medium-sized projects. UR was like the perfect zone for townhomes. It worked great. You know, the N2 zones might be a little big because it captures a whole lot of different things. And I'm curious, you know, whether the city would benefit from more of a finely tuned townhome category that better checks the boxes of the things that you want, that you don't want from that type of development.
That's good. Bridget, you got anything? No?
I mean, my fear, if anyone wanted another residential place type, it would be less dense, not more. So no.
Does anybody want a different industrial type of place? Are you hearing any? Because I was in a conversation with somebody and they were like, well, you know, this life sciences cluster is doing this over here and they're coming into Raleigh and they're, you know, they're going to want to do these kinds of buildings. A friend in San Diego, you know, big life sciences place. And, you know, I get that those are things that are specific there. I mean, we got a medical doodah happening over yonder. And, but I'm just curious as if you're hearing any pressures from things that we don't have here.
I've heard a little bit of that, but I don't think that's completely a place type. I think that's some of what we're working on in the use tables when we're recognizing everything isn't perfectly siloed to one specific use, right? Like Sharon Towers is not just a senior housing community. They actually have retail as part of their ground floor. So I think there's a little bit of that on the industrial side where you want to be able to say, if we've missed it, it's not intentional. I think there's still an opportunity for us to make sure we've got some of those blends.
That's good. I'm down to my last question. You guys got anything? And because I sometimes like to throw a Molotov cocktail on, you know, a fire. What's the unintended consequences that you've seen so far that you really think, oh gosh, I need to raise my hand and say, we need to deal with this?
Cost. I think as you look at the various chapters and then you look at affordability with a capital A in the comp plan, you know, the thresholds, like Roger was talking about, the thresholds for traffic studies have come down. The thresholds for stormwater compliance have come down. the streets map makes sidewalks wider, pushes curb lines back into sight, which takes away usable land for private work. I mean, you're creating the public realm, so there's benefits to there. But I think as we start seeing projects come out of the ground, cost is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. But because, I think we've gotten an increase in height. I think, with the new street standards and open space and everything, the horizontal footprint has gotten tighter, but, we've gotten taller. Well, it's more expensive to go up, than out. So I think there's going to be, we're probably going to see that in the next couple of cycles. But, some of the unintended stuff that actually was in the first draft we kind of worked through with staff. I mean, there was some design standards like, if your building is only 90 feet, but you're requiring a base of this, it's going to look like you're pulling your pants up to your chest, right? So I mean, we've worked through a lot of that unintended stuff. There's going to be more, but yeah.
You got anything?
I'd say the use table. And this goes back to, there was so much in the ordinance. I think we all spent so much time on the content and making sure we had like a tenth of an understanding on the ordinance, that it wasn't until we started looking at the uses that, like we mentioned at the front side, like religious institution, but we're working on it. The campus place type staff is going back to the campus districts and re-looking at the uses. We've had some industrial stuff come up. And I think those are the things that they're almost low hanging fruit, but at the same time, we still have to be intentional about text amendments and making sure how we got there in the first place.
All right. Folks, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your comments. I hope you understand that this commission is always willing to listen to any feedback that you guys have. I know that there's some other things that are going on in the process of feeding back and working directly with staff, and this commission doesn't do that necessarily. I've got some commissioners who are rabid to throw a text amendment over. I'm just going to put that out there. But if there's ever a time you want to have a conversation with us as a commission, the door is wide open. And I hope that in the future, we get to have you guys back to have this conversation again. We greatly appreciate having you here, and the work that you're doing, it helps this process along. As you've all said, this is a work in progress, and as we go along, all the feedback that you guys have to provide is very valuable and necessary. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can get out of your executioner chairs now. Cool beans. All right. I hope I didn't cut anybody else off, but I looked around and I didn't see any hands for questions. So I guess we're good. Cool. I think we've got just a couple of items left on the agenda here. Let me find said agenda. Here it is. Oh, we're down to comments from chair. Hey, everybody. We're going to do I meant to do this earlier on. We're going to do the drill where we go around the table and you tell me about things that you did in the last month. And then I'll tell you about some of the things I did in the last month. So I'm looking at you, Courtney. So if you've gone out and gone to any community meetings, community area planning, any of that sort of stuff, if you haven't done anything, that's fine. But I really want us to be out and be visible. So knock stuff out.
Actually, over the last month, I've done a good bit. Attended a school board meeting. It's requirements of Leadership Charlotte. So with Leadership Charlotte, Allison was on the panel actually last month during that time to talk about zoning, UDO, affordable housing. It was a really good. So been immersed kind of with the city of Charlotte a lot over the last month because of just the requirements for that. So that's what I've been doing.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right, thank you. Had a rezoning in my area for some townhouses, about 45 of them off of Johnson Ayler Road. So looking forward to working with the developer on that one. And then looking forward to extending my reach of rezonings to include all of University area, not just Prosperity Village. And then we working on the community area plans for all of the University area. So northeast, what, middle and inner and northeast, outer and central, something. There's 2 of them.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey.
Yes, conversations with community leaders in West Charlotte, centered around the co-op market and how that's going to impact not only that site, but neighborhoods around it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Did you go to I got the notice for the rezoning public hearing. Was that well attended?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Glad.
There's another one.
Cool. Commissioner Gaston.
I attended one of those north, I don't know which one it was.
Your north inner.
North inner, yeah.
Yes. Rick took your picture.
Oh, he took my picture. Oh, yeah, he did. Yes, it was not well attended, unfortunately, but it was good to get some information. So I got a one-on-one session because that is my area.
Mhm.
So I was able to give input from the community. From what I know, had talking to community, have been to some community meetings in our area as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Blumenthal.
A couple of things over the, can you hear me, Candace? Okay. Couple of things over the last, I believe, month or so. I had the candidate forum for, who was it that hosted that? The candidate forum that you were at.
NIAP.
Oh, the NIAP was that, yeah. So just to hear some city council candidates' perspectives on everything going on from a real estate perspective. Went to the opening of the McCall Park, or I guess the programmatic opening, right? Not the opening of the park itself.
Yeah, it was like the here's what we're gonna do thing.
That McCall Park uptown. Went to I guess it was kind of a real estate event also about just state of affairs at Camp North End last week. That was very enlightening as well. And then, as Commissioner Russell mentioned, he and I went to the training for the Northeast Middle, Northeast Middle and Outer community area plan last week. So that'll kick off tomorrow with the virtual. And then I believe we'll both be in person Thursday, although you will not see me at 9:00 on Saturday morning. On that note, we do have a Google spreadsheet that Courtney so generously put together. I believe it's fully updated right now with times, trainings, locations, things like that. I'm going to send that around, if not today, then ASAP, to the full commission. It looks like we have commissioners that have committed to every single event with the exception of the East, Middle, and Outer. I guess I'll send that around. If anybody can make those, great. If not, I will plan on doing it as well. Also, if any plans have changed, anything you can't make, let me know just so we can make sure that's updated. But again, I'll send that link around, and I will send it to the full commission. I know we're leaning on the planning committee to fill those. However, again, we just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I believe that's it.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you. I have mostly been involved with the Dorada area, in-person meetings, Zoom meetings. We're following a couple of rezonings. I've attended various community meetings on those. Community meetings, not convened by me, by the developer. I did one of the community area planning, and I'm also blanking on the area that includes Dorada, north,
Probably
middle,
north.
outer.
North inner, I bet.
Not inner, I think it's middle, yeah.
Middle?
North, middle, outer. And I will try to get to this east, middle, and outer as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Seeley.
Neely.
I'm sorry. The two of you are twins, separated at birth.
Yeah, he's not here today. So this will be probably since July, because I don't remember what happened in the last 30 days. But so community area planning meeting, I think it was south, west, outer. Okay. Community meetings for areas with Councilwoman Watlington, and a couple other other events. So I'll have to do better about writing those down.
Now we know the effects of that first beer. So it's a great Thank you. Commissioner Shaw.
I set up the agenda for the October 9th Planning Commission meeting. I actually have I have 3 community area planning commitments on the spreadsheet coming up in November and early December that I will also attend, and actually a real estate panel, I think it's next week, that I'm joining.
Thank you. Commissioner Stewart.
Sort of just getting into commission business. I've spent over the last month, I've gone to a number of community events. I have been getting some inbound requests from people from a planning commission and zoning commission perspective questions that they're having, which I'll be following up perhaps with you, Douglas, later to get more information. But I have been active in the community. I spent 3 days last week at the Habitat build out on Plato Price. Arthur Griffin was out there. Had a great conversation with him talking about planning commission. He was very excited that I'm on it. I was at the Renaissance West Mentors event fundraiser a few weeks ago now. I'm on the board at Renaissance West at Camp North End, which was very exciting. And I'm supposed to put a plug out for Community Connect. Let me just pull it up here. In the corridors, Community Connect is the old open streets, if you may recall that. This past weekend was in Sugar Creek and Albemarle. On the 15th is Beatty's Ford and Roswell's Ferry, Graham and North Tryon on the 15th, and West Boulevard and Freedom Wilkinson on the 22nd. So come out and check it out.
Thanks, sir. And, we should have had like applause earlier because this is Robin's first actual meeting in here. So let's have the applause now. Yay!
And my cupcake, thank you.
Yeah, that's your cupcake. Please come back next month. We do this once a month thing. And last but never least, Commissioner Lansdale.
Well, I'm the slacker compared to this group today. So I've just been attending our CRTPO meetings along with the technical coordinating committee meetings by virtual meeting attendance. I did have a virtual community area plan meeting. Don't ask me which one I signed up for. I signed up for all of them, but sometimes my schedule doesn't allow it. But I want to let you guys know on a personal note that we had our 12th annual Bike Walk NC Transportation Summit in Salisbury last week. And, at that convening, we were very proud to bring in NCDOT staff from the Integrated Mobility Division. I think there was about 8 folks there in attendance. We also had much of the leadership staff from Connect Beyond and really talking about traffic demand management systems and how they work. Was an incredible opportunity for us. But on a secondary note, one thing I do for this group, to the happiness and consternation of some and the rest, but we see our council and our legislative liaison committees and joint legislative committees not really representing planning needs. And so I'm really trying to track and understand better how to inform our city council and county commission about adding land use policies to their legislative agendas each year. And just for an FYI, for next meeting, that's going to be part of my effort to do before they establish their priorities in the short session. Thanks.
Last month, just a few days ago, I spoke to Civic Leadership Academy, which is the city's little group of getting people together who are interested in doing things here and stuff. And so I got to speak to them for a little bit. That was wonderful, on with a bunch of planning staff and some folks that I think, hey, I should get them to come talk to our full commission. I spoke to the Montclair Neighborhood Association last week, which was an interesting experience. As I said, hey, raise your hand if you've heard about the 2040 plan. About 4 or 5 people raised their hands. I said, hey, raise your hand if you've heard about the UDO. And a couple of people raised their hands. I said, hey, raise your hand if you've heard about community area planning that happened last month. And nobody raised their hand. And so that's a message. So we need to figure out what that's all about. Connected with folks at REBIC, Rob, who is here today, AIA, the American Institute of Architects. And some of it was very amusing. It was like, you don't have any architects on the commission? this, we'll get to this, South Park Partners as well. And I'm going to get with Center City and University Partners. I have probably 4-ish people to put into our pipeline who've said, hey, we'd like to do this commission things in the future. So that's great. They're rebuilding the bridge over the Catawba River on Wilkinson Boulevard. And for some reason, it is in some process somewhere that our commission had to say yay or nay about it. We have no jurisdiction over this whatsoever, which is also a response, which is the response that we made. So there. There was a UDO text amendment session that Shauna was on with me. It was exciting because she was there. I did the community area planning for the Inner North virtual session, which was attended, but maybe they all came instead of coming to see Melissa and Rick. It was Rick, don't worry, it wasn't you. We had a joint meeting between the Planning Commission's Executive Committee and Park and Rec's Land Acquisition and something, Strategic Planning Committee, because they didn't really understand the process about how purchases of land got made for Park and Rec. I don't understand this, but apparently there's some disconnect between the actual administration of Park and Rec and the commission. But we tried to clarify that, so that was good. We also got a meeting for the zoning committee to talk with CDOT so that we could get a deeper understanding of the processes and protocols there. I have reached out to Councilmember Graham and Driggs to help us get some people into our pipeline. So I'm hopeful to follow up on that. I'm also going to have a chat with Commissioner Mayfield on Wednesday. See where that goes. All the committees, I will be sending around like a doodle to figure out a time so we can have a Zoom meeting and get all the committees, kind of find out where you guys are going, et cetera. There's an item in your packet, which is the work program, and that was sent around to you by Candace. If you will all please take a look at that. If you have comments about the work program, please, it's in the electronic version apparently. If you have any comments about that, please let us all know before the next session, because when you get to the next session, we're going to approve it. The last item is homework. Do we have a homework slide? We don't have a homework slide. All right, our homework is the book by Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinberg. And this is a book that I think is very useful for us all to take a look at, because not unlike the books that I gave you guys last time to look at of understanding where the people element of a city is, this book is about the public spaces that I call semi-private. It's the spaces that we can all go into, libraries, hospitals, churches, spaces like that, parks that we can share, and how that changes the city. And having those spaces or not having those spaces can make some effect on how things go. Up on the board, we've got the meeting schedule for the next month. I think I owe you guys about a minute of time. But our next full commission meeting, we'll have Park and Rec will be here. Bert Lynn and company will be here to tell us about the MEC playbook and the money that they're going to spend for the next 5 years. That's the schedule for full commission meetings till June. I'm excited because in April, we're going to have folks coming in and talking to us about new technology for building buildings and things of that nature. That's going to be kind of cool. Probably going to move that meeting by a day because there's a total eclipse on April 8th, just saying. And I think that's about it. Anybody else got anything, questions, issues, comments? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn? All right, then we'll take that as acclamation. All right, we're out of here, people. Thank you for being here. We'll see you all sometime soon.